the best top expert tips and hacks to make your life better. Life hacks. Technology, business, multimedia, wellness and health, events, reviews, and more. This is Mary Collins from Life Hacks Media, and I have the absolute pleasure to have Becky Hemsley online with me today. Hi, Becky. How are you?
Hello. I'm good, thank you. How are you?
I am thrilled. I have to say that I have been kept company all through the Christmas, New Year period because I've had your lovely poetry. But that's what I'm going to get into now and just tell everyone a little bit about you. Becky Hemsley lives in Leicestershire in the UK with her family. She was a primary school teacher and an educational consultant for over 15 years and is now a full-time author. She has written 2 poetry collections, Talking to the Wild and What the Wild Replied, and has recently published Breathe as a children's book. She is drawn to and moved by nature and its consistencies with human emotion. So with that, Becky, I think all the rest of it, you have to tell us with your beautiful voice. So to begin with, poetry, what got you started in the career of poetry?
Thank you. I have always loved words and writing and quotes, I suppose. When I was a teenager, I was one of those people that wrote lots of quotes in notebooks and things like that. And I suppose that's where it always came from. I think I love the idea that seeing words can make you understand how you're feeling. So it's not that you've suddenly felt differently. It's just that someone's put it's like, oh, someone's seen me almost in words. And so I didn't really write poetry until my children were born. And I don't know whether it was because I shifted into a kind of new phase of my life and I perhaps had a deeper understanding of myself. I think perhaps as a mother, I started writing poetry, and then it just kind of from there. So I've been writing, well, my eldest is 10 and a half, so for about a decade now, really. But it would just probably be in the last few years that I've really feel like I found my voice and really kind of put myself out there, I suppose. And I tend to write in rhyme. That's where I lean towards. I also write non-rhyming poetry as well, but I think I'm quite methodical, rhythmic person. I'm really drawn to music. I danced for quite a lot of my life, and so I think the rhythm and the rhyme just kind of leans into my passions, I suppose, and who I am really as a person.
Right. And speaking of which, you're very good with rhyme and beat and rhythm. So what also inspires your actual poetry, would you say?
I think, it changes a little bit over time, but I think at the heart of it, it's always human nature. And in that, I think the way that our emotions are mirrored in nature and vice versa. So one of the poems in my most recent book is called Seasons, and how actually I do think as human beings we go through seasons, and it doesn't mean that our winter is in nature's winter, but I think we all have these seasons of times where we have to rest and recoup, and then we are suddenly, it's new beginnings and possibilities, and we're hopeful and we're working, and then we sit back and reap the rewards in our summer, and then we kind of start letting go and slowing down, just like we would in autumn. And I think there's so many parts of us that are mirrored in nature and vice versa, that I think that's what tends to inspire me the most when I write.
I love that. I really love that. Working as a journalist, but also as a hypnotherapist, I find that just like you said with seasons, especially now in the new year, people are like, oh, I have to be this and I have to be that. And I have to. And I thought, yeah, actually, when you think about nature, trees are bare at this time of the year. And how many of us internally feel empty, dead, half dead, and just want to close up and just hold on to whatever little bit of nutrients that we have left. And that's maybe what we should do. We should follow our natural or nature's advice and slow down.
I think so. I'm always really conscious around New Year that you get this sudden burst of new year, new you, new dreams, new goals, new hopes. And I find my most creative my most kind of inspired time is in the autumn. And I was born right at the end of August. And I don't think that's then, I think that's why. I think my life didn't begin on the 1st of January. So my seasons, that's not when my new year starts. My kind of spring starts in autumn. And I think we are better to lean into that rather than try and fight against how we naturally feel, I suppose.
Exactly. Instead of just going with the what everyone else is saying, you've got to go with your intuition. And speaking of intuition, what tips or hacks would you advise people who are trying to get into the idea of writing, especially with rhyme?
I think rhyme, it's one of those, it's a real tightrope, writing in rhyme, because if I'm not careful, it can feel really like I'm picking a word just because it rhymes. And I don't want to fall into that trap. I don't want it to feel like forced just because, these two words rhyme, to stick them together. What I tend to do is, goodness for smartphones. So I will, if I've written a lot of a verse or a stanza, and I'm just I know where it's going and I know what I want to say, but I just can't quite find the right words, I'll Google the synonyms for the word that I'm thinking, for the concept I'm thinking of, and I will also Google all the rhyme that I need, so that words that rhyme with pain and also the synonym of, I don't know, desire, and then I will try and cross-reference them and see. And I try to be quite kind to myself in that it doesn't have to exactly rhyme. If it's half rhyme, that's fine. When I read it out, if it sounds like it rhymes enough, that is good enough for me. I don't want to force myself.
Well, that's an excellent tip and hacks, because you're literally telling people it's not just sitting there having to be like super creative, and it is being creative, but it's also doing a little bit of research and looking into, what is the word that sounds the closest that means exactly like what I'm trying to say. And with that, do you have those schedules? Do you sort of say, I am going to write something on certain days of the week, certain times, or does it just come on a whim at 2:00 in the morning?
Actually, when you do have those nights where you can't sleep, and they're often really creative times for me, I suppose, because I'm lying there with nothing else to focus on. And so I also find long car journeys are another time when I will often get ideas in my head. Obviously, I can't physically write it, but I can come up with it in my head. Any moments where I am, like I'm cleaning the house, where I'm on sort of autopilot with something, or where I don't have any other distractions, are the best times for me. And I think I do have to try and set some sort of schedule, but I don't force it. And if I've planned in something else, like today I'd planned, I'm going to film some stuff for YouTube, but actually I was just feeling really creative, so I just got rid of that and ended up writing like 4 poems. So I think again, it comes with that leaning into how you feel and not trying to fight it just because my schedule says I'm doing this today. Actually, if it's creative, role, you can't necessarily do that because you might just not be inspired, I suppose, really.
Exactly. No, and actually, once again, with the idea of the subconscious, they say that the most creative times is when you're doing nothing. That's it. When it's just sometimes the monotony of just vacuuming, washing dishes, that's when actually something spontaneous comes into the mind and really helps this person focus later on. So instead of pushing it and sitting down, I have to write, I have to, just waiting for that moment when it comes up. And then I guess taking notes, like do you ever have that where you have this fantastic idea and then you get back to it and then you're like, oh, where did it go? Or
yeah. Especially when it's like the middle of the night, because I'm like, I'll remember it in the morning and then I never do. So I've learned make good use of like notes app on my phone, or I have an app where it just records like you're speaking. So if I'm in the car and I have an idea, I can pull over and I can start the app and it will just run on the seat next to me, and then I'll just speak out loud.
Excellent. What is it called? We have to put that into your little blog bit as well.
It's called Otter.
Oh, yes, I've heard of that before.
Yeah.
Actually, Scott Simon was on our show, and 19 books. He says he does it while he's jogging in the morning. He just uses audio for
running the time when I
easy. That's amazing.
Yeah. So things like that are just like I was on the way back from the school run earlier, and I was thinking, oh yeah, I've just cracked that bit that I was really stuck on this line and I couldn't get it, and then I got it, and I thought, if I don't write this down or speak, I'm going to forget it. So yeah, just pop the app on and just speak as I'm walking. So I think there's so many amazing things in technology actually that it's okay to use them to help us.
Well, this is it. So much technology, so much at our fingertips, no having to walk to a library and wait for it to be open and using the books. We have all of this, but how much of our creativity is being dashed against the wasteful rocks of TV and, so it's nice to see modern technology having some uses, like being inspired by your beautiful poetry. And so speaking of your beautiful poetry, what about your publications? Tell us a little bit more about these books. I mean, I had mentioned earlier 2 of them that you've named. You just said that you've written 4 more poems. Do we have some more projects and books coming out?
Yes. So the first book I had most of the poems written really for the first book, because like I said, I've kind of been writing for a decade, and then I edited a lot of them over the last couple of years. The pandemic, it's one of those things that it was a really difficult, terrible time for a lot of people, and I'm one of those people that doesn't like to say things happen for a reason, because I think that's really disrespectful for people who have lost people in those times and things like that. But what I do think is some positivity can often come out of even the most difficult times, even if that is just people banding together or people showing support or people being reunited or anything like that. And for me, that time, it gave me the space, it gave me the time to actually sit and focus on something that I otherwise would not have had the time for. I'd have just carried on the treadmill of work and life, and I would have got around to it eventually, I believe, but I don't think it would have happened for a long time. So it gave me that time, it gave me that space, and I was able to look at everything I'd written and edit it and really make it fit with my voice. And so when Breathe kind of got really popular on social media, I thought, let's put all of what I've got into a book and publish that one. And then it just kind of snowballed from there. And so I had lots of time to write lots of poems for the second book as well. And so that one, I released that one in kind of end of September time, October time, I think. Can't remember.
Right.
Yes.
Which we definitely want some samples of your beautiful poetry. I recorded one of yours that was over Christmas about grief. And I was like so excited about it, because it's just, but you do such beautiful, you've got YouTube as well. But we'll talk about that later. Yes. Publications. So you had the first one, which is Talking to the Wall, and then the What the Plot.
Yeah. Actually, you say about grief. So one of the books that I'm working on at the minute is I wanted to do a book with poems about grief, really, because I think it's such an important subject. It's an inevitable part of life, and it can be a really scary, lonely, difficult time for people, obviously. And what I realised when I was kind of editing and looking through my last book was that whilst there were a few poems about grief, they're just kind of sprinkled in amongst others. And whilst that's fine, if you are dealing with grief, actually to kind of just happen upon one and maybe think, oh, this is really helpful, and then go to another one that's all about trees is perhaps not as helpful. And I noticed that I have a lot of a lot of people message me, a lot of people comment and say, this is really helpful when I share things about grief. So I feel like there is a need for people to have more of a bank to refer to. And writing about grief is difficult because I don't like it to feel hopeless, because people already feel hopeless, but it also shouldn't feel trivialized.
Right.
So quite a difficult balance to get, but I think it's an important balance. So I want to make a collection which is poems just for sort of, weathering the storm, I suppose.
Right.
So that's kind of what I've been working on today, actually.
Okay.
So I'm going to have a little break from that because I feel a bit of, because it's quite heavy.
Right. It is a heavy subject, but like you said, you have managed to, I think, really be empathetic. And so the one which I think because you just sprung it on us on Instagram without even naming. So I think I named it grief at Christmas or grief on the holidays, something like that. And you're like, yeah, that, even say, can you just give us, because that was a nice short one. Can you give us, do you, by heart, I mean, I know you created it, but I don't know if you forget sometimes some of your own poetry or.
Yeah, no, I generally do, but let me just bring the visual just so that in case I do get a little bit stuck. But I generally remember what I write. So it was, the Christmas dinner table's laid, but there's an empty chair, the chasm of a memory of one who should be there. A present never bought or wrapped for one who won't appear. A missing glass to clink as we all toast another year. And if you're not excited for a Christmas set apart, if you're feeling apprehensive, there's a sadness in your heart. Just know there is no right way that you're meant to bear the sorrow. Simply do whatever you must do to make it through tomorrow.
Just beautiful.
Thanks.
Just beautiful. And really, it, like you said, it makes you hurt because every one of us has someone that we wish was there with us on a special holiday, on their birthday, at that moment, going shopping, laying the table, whatever it is. Doesn't have to be just about Christmas. And it's not. It's about that realization that person is missing. And you're not saying, we'll get over it. And you're not saying wallow. You're just saying, take that moment. I understand. There are more of us that are with you. You'll get through.
Yeah.
You don't have to feel guilty. You don't have to feel happy. You don't have to overcome. I'm a twin who's lost my twin. And that means so much. Even though it's been years, that means so much to so many people. And so I think you're absolutely right. There needs to be not just this one little speckle of grief. There needs to be a book where the person can sob over it. And release of emotions really do help the brain and the body recover.
Yeah. And I think that's really what my whole aim is with writing poetry in general. It's just that help people know that whatever they feel, it's okay. Like, emotions are not wrong. Sometimes the way we respond because of our emotions might not be perhaps the best choice at the time, but your actual emotion is not wrong because it's involuntary. You don't choose to feel fear, you don't choose to feel grief, you don't choose to feel joy, you just feel it. And so I think that's when I write, that's what I'm really just trying to do, to say that it's okay to feel, and also feelings are universal. There are people everywhere feeling grief, there are people everywhere feeling joy, and you shouldn't feel ashamed or alone. Or alone because of that.
Life hacks. Lifehacks.com. That's with a K and an X. No, I can't wait till you come up with she's a fighter, not a flighter. I have this argument with my children and they're like, why do you always have to fight? Why do you always have to? I'm like, that's me. That's my response. Boudica's way, So we're working on this grief book. When can we expect it? Do you have any sort of deadlines or?
I don't know. I'd really like to get it done within the next couple of months, really. So yeah, that's kind of what I'm aiming for, I suppose, by the end of February. It will have like a couple of the ones that are already in the other book, just so that they are in that kind of, collection. But the majority of them will kind of be new, I suppose. And what I've done already is just write down all the ideas for them, and then I kind of go back and I'm like, right, which one's jumping out at me at the minute?
Or you got to have one with pets. Pets are so important to us as well.
Yeah.
There's so many subjects. But so when you'd done the, talking to the wild and then the wild replied ones, give us a little bit more context of what those were really about.
Talking to the wild, I suppose, was because it wasn't ever really planned as a collection. It was just everything I'd written. So I had to sort of find a way to bring it all together. That's the hardest thing with a poetry collection, is it's not a story, it's not a book, it's not, like a narrative book. But you can't just like bundle them all in, randomly and just expect it to make sense. So I kind of went with this idea of starting at the whole world, this big like universe, going right back down to you, and then going back out, and sort of in the sense of kind of getting lost in life and then finding yourself again. That's kind of where I went with the first one. Like I say, all the poems were kind of written, so they had to sort of slot in. So there was like 4 sections. It was like,
that's not a rule. That's not every rule, but it works beautifully for you, and it works beautifully with your books. You're self-published as well.
Yeah. So traditional publishing offer for the second book, but it wasn't. I hadn't done the book yet. They just came and said, "Do it," and I was back and forth about it. But actually, when I weighed it up, what they wanted me to do, the amount they wanted me to write, and what they wanted me to write about, just wasn't. It wasn't sitting right with me, and so it was really hard to say no. Because my book would have been in bookstores and things like that. But actually, I think what I've learned throughout all of this really is that being true to yourself is the most important thing, and I don't want to trade feeling comfortable and feeling happy with what I've done with seeing my book on in the local shop, so yeah.
I think that's wonderful. And I think your following will just grow, because the energy that it's created with, the beauty, the way it's written, and the way you actually say all of your different poems, you've got it in the bag, and whoever's missing out in the world, that's just too bad. We're going to have to, that's what's great about internet now, is that it can get to everyone everywhere. So I'm definitely looking forward to your next book. And of course, people can find on your social media, they can go to Becky Hemsley Poetry. I will have all of the links on my website, lifehacks.com. That's with a K and an X. And you are on, you're the third interview that has this link tree. I was like, why? And my last artist he was like, because then they can see all the different layers of art that I have and everything. So this is something I have to look into and discover, this link tree. But also, we will be, your Instagram is great because you put up so many posts, like with you reading the thing, which is even more, because you have a great voice for the audio file. Like it's really lovely listening to you, and that's just Becky Hemsley Poetry as well, isn't it? So easy to find. And so you're working on that book, and is there another one? I mean, you said, is there more than?
Yeah, well, I'd already started one, which is called Letters from Life. So it is just a bit more of a random selection, I suppose. And I might just do it with a general kind of chronology of like young to old. And I think because I had quite a lot of non-rhyming poetry just hanging around, and when I shared some of it, people quite liked it. And I thought, well, I don't want to pigeonhole myself. I don't want to box myself into English rhyming poetry. So there is lots of rhyme in it as well. But I thought, well, actually, I might as well use some of this. So there's that. You're
going to be working on a collection of different stories. Is there any more that you can share with us? Like, give us a little sample of.
I think the sort of next collection that's not the grief one. So the kind of just life poems, I suppose. Because there's a lot more non-rhyming ones. well, not a lot more, but there are non-rhyming ones, which tend to be more sort of advicey, using inverted commas, because it's more like I'm talking to the reader a lot more in those. So it's a slightly different vibe, I guess.
Love that. I was an agony on, so I love that. I'm always giving advice nobody wants, but like opinion.
Yeah, I know. I don't know if you want to hear this, but
yours will be nice. No, yours will be nice, because in poetry, I think that's just wonderful. Well, Becky, I think you're doing a fabulous job. I really look forward to more. I have bought one of your books on Amazon. I have purchased Talking to the Wild. I know that you also have an Etsy account, I guess, where people can also buy separately, but it is there on Amazon, Becky Hemsley Poetry. Super easy to find. We will put up all the links on lifehacks.com. Becky, it's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me.
Lifehacks.com. That's with a K and an X.